How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to TheBlueShifting. Welcome back to Higurashi When They Cry. We're in Chapter 6. And yeah, so we're watching some interesting stuff. We're seeing Rena's path in this journey as we get to Watanagashi. The murders have occurred. We're post-murders now, and Rena has been selected by Oishi and has been pulled aside, which is really interesting because that's a fairly large deviation from the other routes we've seen up until now. So that's going to be some interesting stuff to chew on in the coming episodes. It also feels like we got some insight into Rena's past. We finally get a bit of understanding about Oyashiro's curse. Now we see how it manifested that she was having like schizophrenic delusions, or at least they looked schizophrenic. They if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. It's probably a duck, but she interpreted it and felt it was that she had a subsequent hallucination that also promised her that the hallucinations would go away when she came to the valley, and they seemingly have. Now, is that strictly because of medicine or because of a reduce in her stress? Most likely the reduction in her stress, but it's funny because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way, where she had hallucinations that were stress-induced, and then she had a hallucination that promised her that she would be safe from her hallucinations that she was feeling is real, which, by the way, that's the thing. What makes hallucinations scary is that they feel 100% real. Your brain is interpreting like information just like it does for your actual reality, but it's using its own phantoms to do so. But your brain is communicating the exact same signals that it would if it were real. So like it's really hard to understand because you look at something like, oh my gosh, like there's maggots crawling out of my skin, and normal rational thought tells you that could never happen. But when you're having a genuine hallucination, your brain's telling you it's happening, like that it actually is happening. And there's nothing in the world that's just going to tell you that's not real, because anything that someone tries to tell you from outside is going to be sending and using the same signaling that your brain's using to tell you that it's happening. That's why hallucinations are so scary, is because you're not going to just be able to recognize, hey, this is beyond what's reasonably real, and I can recognize that. That's just not how that works. You can try to do that. There are exercises that are supposed to try and help keep you grounded, but the problem is that it only works if it's not reasonably possible that it could happen. And a lot of hallucinations are inspired by things that we see and hear. So whilst normally you can't have maggots crawling through all over your skin and body, it is possible, and people can see how when people have a bad wound, there can be maggots eating the dead flesh of the wound on a person's body. So the fact that it can happen, as in there can be maggots present in a wound, adds to this level of a possibility there's a veneer possibility, I guess we'll call it, like on the surface, where like, can you dispute that it can't ever happen? Technically no, and that makes it much more grounded, even if it's absolutely crazy. So yeah, big stuff there, lots of meat and potatoes there. But the fact that her hallucinations gave her an out, and that by fulfilling that desire, she did reduce her stress, and she did reduce the likelihood of those hallucinations. But I wonder if the hallucinations are going to come and play a factor, because now I feel like we're setting a stage, what I'm going to call an unreliable narrator, which has been a common thing. I think that we've had unreliable narrators for the majority of these chapters, and that's part of the mystery, is that we're seeing things from perspectives that are flawed, potentially have delusions or misinformation in them, and they're presented and treated like fact, because that's how human beings are. That's how we see our world. We just assume we have all the facts. Even if we doubt we have them, we tend to assume that we know them, or at least that we're most likely right. So we're now entering a territory where I feel like most things we see with Rena, we can't really take at face value, because not only can she technically have hallucinations that can feel so real that she can act on them, especially when she gets stressed, which, hey, when you've just committed a murder, I imagine your stress levels are pretty freaking high. And so I'm not sure we can trust much of what's going on with Rena and what she even perceives around her at this point. And we also have the other aspect of this, where we are entering like the Twilight Zone part of the stories, where things sometimes just happen and we don't know why. some things have explanations. Some things I'm pretty sure we're gonna like. I struggle to see how some things are just not gonna happen or make sense. Like Keiichi in chapter 3, when he ambushed somebody riding on their motorcycle and chased them, killed them, buried them. There's no body. The uncle seemingly didn't even seem to have been attacked. Motorcycle was thrown into the swamp, but that was never accounted for. There's so much stuff that just happens that if there's an explanation, I genuinely struggle to figure out what it could be, and it's not yet offered up any potentials. So yeah. But anyway, long story short, I'm going to jump into this, but I'm going to say right here and now that I'm going to be skeptical of most anything we see from Rena's perspective from here on out. There's a level of me that's going to try and remember that we are entering a territory where the unreliability of the narrator is at an all-time high. And I wouldn't be surprised if before the end of this, we start seeing more delusions or downright hallucinations on her part. Because the stage is set. If she has even if you take it on there is no curse angle, she has a medical condition that primes her that when she's deeply stressed, where she can see and have hallucinations that feel real and that she'll act upon. And again, having committed a murder twice, I think that stress level is pretty high, even if she doesn't feel like it is. She tells herself she's happy. That was the other side of it. I was also going to say, she not only has this side of her that has hallucinations, but she's also good at self-deception, where she will try to tell herself how she feels, what she thinks, and what she's believing, when that's not what's actually happening. But she will try to put on a mask so hard that she convinces herself it's real. That also means that there's going to be a lot of unreliability here. Anyway, let's keep going. I rambled a long time that time. About homing ability and homesickness. If you interpret a homing ability in a broad sense, you can say that most animals have a homing ability. It's the same with humans. We like to sleep, rest, and eat in a place where we feel comfortable, namely our homes. Your home is to you what nests are to animals. Therefore, we can say that humans have a homing ability as well. First of all, why do animals need nests? The answer is the same for humans. Sleeping, resting, eating are essential actions for survival, and at the same time, those actions leave one defenseless as well. That's why you need a safe area where you can be defenseless. Everybody knows that not having a safe area results in a high level of stress. When you move an animal to a new environment, it naturally becomes stressed. When you force a person to live in a foreign land where they aren't comfortable, they become greatly stressed as well. Everybody also knows that this kind of stress is called homesickness. The Japanese don't know much about homesickness. We define it as mental weakness, and we neglect to treat it for a long period of time. Is that a cultural thing? It's considered like a flaw to be homesick? However, homesickness has a very long history. In Europe's Middle Ages, people believed it wasn't a mental, but rather a physical disease. People also believed that out of everyone, the Swiss got the disease the most. The Swiss, you see, were known to be an ethnic group that worked away from home in that era. They lived far away from their homes. There were no telephones at the time, so they couldn't even hear their families' voices for ages and ages. It's easy to imagine that young Swiss workers got homesick while working in a strange land. These Swiss who got homesick wanted to go home, but they couldn't because of their jobs. The conflict made them weak physically and mentally. Some of them went crazy and tried to escape from their reality by committing suicide or running away. The Swiss at the time were very superstitious, and many folk remedies and occult-like treatments to prevent homesickness went around. Since going home was the only treatment, they must have called it a fatal disease. But it isn't really one, of course. Specifically, homesickness is a sign of the human homing instinct. Your brain desires to go back to your safe area, namely your home. At first, your brain makes you remember the happy memories of your home, and it urges you to go home in a natural way. But when reason stops you from achieving your desire, your brain starts sending unnatural signals to your body. As a result, your body gets weak, makes it more difficult for you to live on a strange land. In the end, you have to bend to reason in order to achieve your desire to go home. So I'm trying to think if I've had this before, because I've definitely moved far away from home, like where I grew up. There were a few moments and a few weeks there that were pretty rough. I had an unfortunate combination of my first time moving away from home, especially, for out of a choice rather than a necessity. I mean, it was basically a necessity, but it was also, one that we could technically have said no to. But we moved, and then right after I moved, my great-grandmother passed away. that combo was really rough for a few weeks there. But I don't know if it's ever been this bad that it's describing. I mean, being able to call people and talk to them on the phone helps a lot. But at the same time, I'm not sure if homing instinct is as strong as some of the people here it's describing. So homesickness is born out of our homing instinct. And the stronger one's homing instinct is, the stronger the homesickness. The strength of that homing instinct varies from individual to individual and depends on the environment in which the individual lives. When your home is a safe environment you live in dangerous, your homing instinct grows stronger. That's also probably a big factor. When you're away from home and then where you are instead is dangerous, oh man, like imagine in the military, homesickness is terrible. On the other hand, when the environment you live in is safer than your homing instinct becomes very weak. Okay, so maybe that's true, but I wouldn't say that was the case for me. I'm describing that I didn't have a super strong homing instinct, but I also had a very safe home. I was very lucky to have a very loving like home environment. I feel like part of it was that I left home, but I had a new home. Like I had a new safe place to go to. I think that helped it a lot. But apparently that doesn't help everybody. Safety isn't the only element that affects its strength. Cultural aspects affect it too. I imagine going somewhere overseas or to another country would make it much harder. The many customs demanding families to return home for major events varies with each region, so your birthplace's culture also alters the strength of your homing instinct. Amongst these religions, the transcendents of Onagafuchi village were believed to have excessively strong homing instinct. The people of Onagafuchi forbade their fellows from ever leaving. Many believe this was the effect of the elitism and sense of purity I already mentioned before. People today still strongly believe that Oyashiro-sama puts his curse on you if you break his rule and abandon the village. This superstition can be interpreted as homesickness. If homesickness is directly proportional to one's homing instinct, then the exaggerated expression curse would signify the strength of that homesickness and also their homing instinct. I can assume that they hated the outside world and created an insular society precisely because of this powerful homing ability. Unfortunately, there's no way to measure the strength of a homing ability that the primitive people of Onagafuchi had. It was so strongly forbidden to leave the village that nobody had left it long enough to get homesick. However, after the Meiji era, things changed. The sacredness of Onagafuchi dwindled with the efforts of modernization. Many young people started longing for city life, and some people were forced to leave the village to get a job. As a result, villagers started venturing outside the village borders. That was when the transcendents of Onagafuchi realized how strong their homing ability was for the first time. The residents of Hinamizawa got extremely homesick. After a while, people started to call this homesickness the curse of Oyashiro-sama. It became rumored that the person who left the village to get a job in a strange land was cursed, that he went crazy and died. And people who had left the village started coming back to it, either it or a nearby town. Their homesickness and their homing ability were very strong because of their culture. It's reasonable to think that these were cultivated by a unique religion in Hinamizawa, namely the cult of Oyashiro-sama. From the moment they were born, they were taught the rules of Oyashiro-sama. They must have felt guilty about leaving the village unconsciously. As a result, they considered their homesickness to be the curse of Oyashiro-sama. I'm not sure if the homesickness got stronger because of the rules of Oyashiro-sama or if they made the rules of Oyashiro-sama because of the homesickness got stronger. I don't know which came first. It's a chicken or egg. I got tired of reading such small print to lay down on the floor on my back. The true identity of the curse of Oyashiro-sama is homesickness? Mio-san believed my story, and she let me read the scrapbooks. That's why I expected to find something interesting. But what it's saying is the answer is all homesickness, which many doctors told me many times at counseling. I'm a little upset. The word homesickness can't explain the extraordinary experience I had. I saw Oyashiro-sama come down to me in a bright light in the bathroom. I saw the dusky red nasty maggots come out of my blood vessels. Also, I will say this, I can't remember what it was called, but I remember reading an article that talked about, it was basically putting a potential scientific explanation for people who genuinely feel like they've seen, angels or pillars of light. It is a kind of reaction someone can have that can be independent of having schizophrenia, but it can be caused by, a seizure. You have a seizure, but as part of the seizure experience, because sometimes we associate seizure with losing control of your musculature structure. So your eyes roll in the back of your head, you start to shake. That's your muscle, like the neurons that triggering your muscles all firing randomly. But other parts of your brains and neurons can fire randomly in a seizure. It doesn't always manifest with shaking. And one of these could be a visual cortex. So you could have a seizure where your brain suddenly thinks that light is suddenly very intense, and you might even hear things. And so that can be an explanation for some of these experiences as well. So again, there's more explanations to like as we've learned through medicine, we've learned that some of the things that people have claimed throughout history might have been experienced. There's an explanation of how it could have happened without any actual exterior, actual like metaphysical manifestations. The scrapbook didn't explain any of that. I don't understand how Mio-san was going to explain the cloud of maggots. Maybe she didn't have an explanation of that to begin with. Was it just a delusion? I flipped through one of my other scrapbooks Mio-san let me borrow, looking for an explanation of the maggots I saw. Then I found it. It had an exact title I was looking for. Oh, really? About maggots and the curse of Orishiro-sama. Alright, K-game. I feel like every time I try and say, hey, let's keep it grounded, let's talk about reality here, and then we do this crap. In the Meiji area, a group of villagers were on their way back to Hinamizawa, and they started discussing a rumor about a weird disease. They said the maggots started crawling out of the wounds of a person who left Hinamizawa, and that the maggots ate the person's body from the inside. The Shinto priest of the Furude Shrine at the time explained the weird disease was a sign of the curse of Orishiro-sama. According to tradition, the Shinto priest showed the villagers an ancient scroll, and he told them the story of the maggots had been passed down through the ages. This is what the scroll said. The world where the demons came from must be interpreted as the land of death, and the demons in that land of death had to live their lives while being eaten by maggots. The villagers who are of the demon's blood have nothing to worry about as long as they live in Hinamizawa under the protection of Orishiro-sama. But once they left Hinamizawa, abandoning the protection, the maggots that had been sleeping in their blood of the demons would start to awaken, and they'd eat their bodies from the inside out. This maggot disease scared the villagers for a while, and they asked the shrine to provide them with protective talismans whenever they had to leave the village on business. This is interesting, as it's similar to the way homesickness was dealt with by the Swiss in the Middle Ages. After the war started, the delusion of the maggot disease faded away, but there remained a custom to send talismans to family that lived away from Hinamizawa. The talismans had the word maggot on them. But the most interesting part about all of this is that the residents of Hinamizawa didn't know about the maggot disease until the rumors began. I thought that the unconscious worship made these people think of homesickness as a curse, so the cases of previously unknown maggot disease directly contradicted the research I'd done so far. It's natural to think the group of people who were on their way back from the village were lost in a mass delusion because they strongly believed in the curse, and that the Shinto priest took advantage of their state of panic to instill a deeper faith in them. But I'm not fully convinced that was merely a coincidence that this mass delusion matched the story of an old picture scroll. I wonder if it's possible to see maggots in a wound without having a prerequisite knowledge of when a person is cursed by Orishiro-sama. Yeah, I think that's interesting. It's interesting that she had this complete story without any of the background. That starts feeling a lot more like legitimate because, yeah, ooh, oh, that's cool. Got chills for that. I wish Orishiro-sama would put his curse on someone I could study. Oh, well, oopsie. I'd love to see those maggots coming out of someone. I felt as if Mio-san was here making the request of me. I remember. When she gave me the scrapbooks, she said that I might be the only one who could understand them. I felt good just for a moment, because I found out the maggots weren't a delusion. But at the same time, it destroyed my excuse that it was a delusion. The maggots weren't a delusion, they were there. All of a sudden, my wrist and elbows and inner thighs and neck started itching. I felt the urge to cut open a blood vessel, but I quietly held it down. I remembered that Mio-san looked very serious when I talked about the maggots. She must have thought it was creepy, but so did I. While I was crying because nobody believed me, a part of me didn't want to believe my body was filled with those creepy things. I think part of me wanted to believe it was a delusion. And now I knew it wasn't. It wasn't a delusion. There are some people who had the same experience. Maggots in the demon's blood will awaken when you lose the protection of Orishiro-sama. In other words, they may not awaken under the presence of Orishiro-sama, but all the villagers still have maggots in them without knowing it. People in the demon's blood are people who have the creepy maggots in their bodies. I tried not to jump to conclusions and flipped to the pages again. I unconsciously looked for something related to maggots. About parasites and control of the host. The maggot disease made me think of something. It's possible they say the extremely strong homesickness in Hinamizawa was an infectious disease caused by some kind of parasite. I'm not trying to connect the maggots they saw with parasites. I'm trying to think about the possibility their culture and their religion might be associated with an infectious disease. I mean, that's possible. I was saying this for a while. I was thinking that it was related to a genetic thing. Because when you have isolated backcountry villagers like this, like a lot of times you're going to end up marrying, and over time, like you're marrying and having children with people who are genetic cousins, and that can start leading to odd things, right? And I thought that's what it was going to be, some type of genetic disorder, or that, and maybe combined with like a natural remedy that I think is what the syringe chemical is. Like, I think there's got to be some kind of like a mushroom or something up here that they get the serum from that makes people go crazy. Anyway, many infectious diseases are caused unintentionally by parasites. A parasite's host is literally its home. It wants to live with the host body as long as it can. The best way to do that is to coexist with the host without the host knowing it. But some parasites try to control their host and use them for prosperity. For example, some parasites have the ability to control their host. The best example of this I know of is the prion that like gets into the heads of mice that makes them not fear cats and actually want to approach them, so that they're more likely to get eaten because the parasite's trying to get to the cat. So it infects a mouse and it wants to get to a cat. So it makes the mouse more reckless and not have any fear of its predators, so it gets eaten so that the parasite can get into the cat. And they actually theorize that this parasite might get inside people, not through eating mice, obviously, but like it might be able to infect people, and it makes those people want to be closer to cats, and might be like, I think they were saying it might be a potential explanation for why the old cat ladies are a thing, because it seems odd, right, that an old person living alone and feeling lonely would acquire so many cats it becomes uninhabitable and bad for the cat and the person, the cats and the person. It's like, why would someone who has 18 cats constantly try and adopt more cats? Well, maybe because there's a little parasite in them trying to get closer to cats, in order to force them to be eaten by a superior host. A typical example is the Dicrocolium dendriticum. It uses snails or ants as intermediate hosts, and it forces them to move to the upper side of vegetation, so it's easier for a superior host to consume it, like a bird maybe. One parasite that controls more complicated animals is called Toxoplasma gondii. Uses mice as intermediate hosts, with the superior host being cats. Yes! I'm on top of my stuff. This parasite makes the mouse lose the fear of cats in order to increase its chance of getting eaten, so the parasite can live within the cat instead. I don't know why I rant when the game's going to just tell you the same thing, but in a much more eloquent way. There are parasites that choose hosts at random. The rabies virus is commonly known for that. It lives and breeds in the brain of a host and moves into the host's saliva through the salivatory glands. It makes the host extremely aggressive in order to make it bite things randomly, so that in turn can move to other hosts through the saliva. This is one of those things that's really interesting. When you get to that biological, like the small scale of this, it's like it's bred to spread through aggression like that, which means that some of the creature goes into the brain and activates that. But the things living in the brain, those entities in the brain, they're going to live and die inside the animal. And in fact, they're going to kill the animal. Like, they're essentially like guaranteeing their own non-existence. They only do it because their children and progeny go down into the saliva, and some of them will move on to another host. So the whole way that the virus can survive is by intentionally terminating its host, in order to make sure that when they die, it will spread some of its children to a new host, which is kind of like insane. That's what rabies does. Many parasites have a similar ability to control a host to their benefit. Also, with rabies, I think that might be why they become hydrophobic. Like when creatures have rabies, and like we've seen this in the human cases as well, they try to drink water and they will get they'll be terrified or find it like nausea-inducing. They just can't do it. They will die of dehydration because they won't drink water. And maybe that's because drinking water would wash out some of the parasite that's sitting in your saliva and wash it down, making it less likely to just spread. So the effect of making someone hydrophobic is potentially about, making sure that the saliva is as infected as possible. All right. Anyway, the similar ability to control hosts to their benefit. Is this going to talk about the wasp that lays its eggs inside of like caterpillars, or like the Oh no, the scariest one are the mushrooms. The mushrooms that will like grow into the brains of an ant and control the ant's body whilst it's brain dead. The examples I used above are about parasites that move into other hosts to prosper. But I think there must be some kind of parasite that controls the host in order to have the comfortable environment in which to live. I want to try connecting this theory to the abnormal homing ability and homesickness of the Onogafuchi residents. Oh, okay. So she's postulating here that if there's a parasite that lives inside a human host, but there's conditions that the parasite wants to maintain, like a specific environment, like a certain zone with like the right humidity, right temperature variance, and all that stuff, right? And that maybe is like the one place where this entity can live both inside the host and outside the host, allowing it to spread from person to person. But how does it keep the host from traveling so far away where it can no longer survive because it doesn't have the right conditions? Well, a parasite can affect the brain chemistry. What if it affected the brain chemistry, making the people more paranoid and afraid of leaving? You get like they basically hijack that homesickness and amplify it. Again, it's kind of like I was talking before with the rabies people with hydrophobia. It takes a normal thing your brain does to help you avoid danger, your fear response, and it turns it up to 11 in response to stimuli that the parasite does not want you to interact with. So it could do something like that, making people more afraid, making them more likely to hallucinate, making them more likely to be paranoid if they leave the area where the infected material, the parasite, would be. My counter to this is that Hinamizawa lives in a temperate zone where they experience multiple seasons: heat in the summer, cool in the winter. This doesn't seem very conductive of a parasitic entity that needs to reside in a very specific place, because that's a very unstable location. And if it could survive long terms like winters and springs, and like winters and summers, that variation would mean that it wouldn't need to thrive in just Hinamizawa. It could thrive in a lot of places around the world. It would need temperate zones, and there's a lot of temperate zones on the planet. So why would it be so locked down strictly to Hinamizawa? The only thing I can think of is that people might be part of the life cycle, but not a permanent one. So maybe it's like whatever it is that lives at Hinamizawa spends the majority of its lifespan outside in the area around it, maybe living in other organisms in the area, and they use humans primarily for a specific stage of it, maybe to give birth to their young, so like maybe it's where they lay their eggs or spores, maybe it's where the mating occurs, so like they need the humans for like that part of the process, or incubation or something. And that would be like, I could see incubation of like eggs being a good one, because then it's like you use a human host to help the children to like thrive, but if they leave, they're too far away to be able to participate with the rest of the colony or whatever it is. But again, like this is so vague. Like I don't see why this type of entity wouldn't just spread to the whole world, or like majority of the world. Let's say there's some kind of parasite that exists in Hinamizawa that lives within all the villagers' bodies. For the parasite, Hinamizawa is the most comfortable environment to live in, so it could give the host a strong homing ability in order to make them stay in Hinamizawa. Furthermore, it causes the host to get homesick whenever they ignore this homing ability and try to leave. Parasites need hosts in which to live. It's convenient for them if the host builds a community in the environment where it feels comfortable. Oh, you know what? There's something here, the swamp. The swamp might be what they actually want, because that's like a big feature of the Onogafuchi village, was the swamp. And it would also be like the demons came from the swamp, so maybe the parasite came from the swamp. This theory makes it easy for me to explain the mysteries I described earlier. The Transcendents of Onogafuchi knew about the existence of this parasite. They knew that, as hosts of the parasite, they couldn't live outside the village, and that's why they created a culture and rules that prohibited contact with the outside world. It also explains why people acted so abnormal during the dam conflict. So the demons that came out of the swamp of the legend of Onogafuchi's Oyashiro-sama can be interpreted as the mass spread of the parasite. The story about demons attacking the villagers must be a metaphor for the behavior of the infected villagers who were controlled by the parasite. That's interesting. This theory is too crazy. I should have just laughed about it. But I feel bad for Mio-san, so I decided not to. Hinamizawa was controlled by Parasite. You could just use that theory to explain how maggots came out of me. I felt a little bit dizzy. I was so confused, and part of me thought it was ridiculous. Another part of me thought it was more convincing than any curse. I mean, honestly, the Parasite Theory holds about as much water as a curse does. But Mio-san was probably erased because she wrote these scrapbooks. If so, the contents of these scrapbooks must be something they can't ignore. They'd try to get all of her scrapbooks and consign them to oblivion. What if they notice some of her scrapbooks are missing? I felt a chill run through my spine. I have to keep it a secret I have these scrapbooks, and I'll have to try and understand more about their contents. I remember Mio-san told me the 3 families are behind the series of mysterious deaths and that they're trying to resurrect the cult of Oishiro-sama. According to the theory I just read, the parasite must be trying to maintain the current environment in Hinamizawa. The healthiest environment for it is a completely closed village, just like the primitive Onagafuchi. Oh, and also, it would also explain the dam. Because they talk about the dam destroying Hinamizawa, and that's one part. Like, that might be true, but you know what also would probably do? It'd probably end up draining or at least directly affecting the swamp. Because, like, the swamp exists because it has a constant flow of water. That's how swamps are. They're just like fields of stable amounts of water. If you put up a dam, you're going to change that. Now, sometimes it can make things drier and dry out the swamp. It might make things wetter, turn it into like a big pond or maybe a lake. But it might be, it might affect a parasite poorly, which could also explain why they get so agitated. But again, you're starting to attribute, because a parasite was going to operate off of unless you're talking about like sci-fi type parasites, parasites in general operate off of instinct. And I don't know if a parasitic instinct would understand that a dam would affect the swamp. Like, the instinct that they're working on is the idea that, hey, the host should not leave this area. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Anyway, healthiest environment is completely closed off village. It must have been very comfortable for the parasite if no hosts go outside the village. They don't even like the villagers often leave the village to go shopping. That means the parasite will try to goad the host into resurrecting the cult of Oishiro-sama. I remember there was an article of the scrapbook saying the demon's blood runs thickest in the 3 families. That would mean that they have a large amount of the parasite in them than the other villagers, and that they're under its control. The 3 families seem to be planning to bring the village back to the Onagafuchi era. Reviving the Watanagashi festival after the dam conflict can be interpreted as their desire to revive the faith that had started to fade after the Meiji era. The 3 families, especially the Sonozaki family, have great influence over the region and the public organizations. What's going on here? Oh, freaking theme of the freaking series. I thought this would be a poorly written theory, but the pieces fit together one after another. I've never played a jigsaw puzzle as crazy as this. Think about my ravings of a madman when I did my like chart of madness. At this point, I would have to add a 3rd branch at the bottom. So we'd have branch of the cult, branch of the like curse, and then now branch of the parasite. And I wonder if I were to examine the rest of the story so far with the parasite angle, if the parasite angle would actually make more sense than it is right now. Because right now, it feels like on the level for me of the curse. Like, yeah, can it be a possibility? Maybe. But so far, I still feel like the majority of the evidence kind of points more towards the crazy cult. I felt my brain start to swirl due to the absurd theory, and part of me thought this was ridiculous. Another part of me thought it might be about to expose an unbelievable truth. When I tried to look into the center of it, it felt as if I was going to fall into a whirlpool and drown. I'll have to devote myself to reading more seriously. There must be some truth to this. It caused misfortune and made my life miserable after I moved to Ibaraki. I might be able to find the truth, including the cause of my parents' divorce and my desperate behavior. Right then, I heard a knock at the door all of a sudden, scaring me. I hid the scrapbooks under a cushion.
Rena, 電話が来てるぞ。
Oishi.
電話？こんな時間に？誰だろう？
本屋さんからだぞ。
A bookstore?
本の取り寄せとか頼んだのか？沖宮書房の大石さんって人からだ。
Oh, it is Oishi. He's just saying, he just came up with a story. Yep. So Oishi's has chosen Rena as his potential contact because he feels like she's isolated. Someone said in a comment last week that they thought that was pretty. That was a good observation that connection I made, but it wasn't like it was a big leap. It's just like something like Oishi pointed it out, and I was like, okay, yeah. So if he's picked somebody, he's not picking somebody he feels like, oh, like I have a bond with them. He's picking the person who might be easiest to isolate. I opened the windows. But all they let in was heat and the cries of the cicadas.
味いな。
味いいね。
It was break time between classes, but we couldn't really get any rest. Mion and I leaned at our desks, exhausted by the heat. The younger kids sure are tough, considering how the heat wasn't bothering them at all. They were running around the classroom despite the temperature.
やっぱりさ、都会の学校だと教室にもクーラーとか入ってるわけ？
I think it depends. Growing up, I always had air conditioning in my schools, but in this area, like apparently, like they've talked about how like a lot of these like the schools where I live now, they're older buildings. A lot of them don't have AC or their AC is like bad because we've had days where like they've announced school cancellations because it was too hot.
そんなことねえぞ。あるのはせいぜい職員室ぐらいだな。
うわぁ、それは羨ましいね。生徒みんなで職員室を襲って占拠とかしないの？
その辺の発想が実にミオン臭い。ああ。
What was that? I didn't even have the energy to laugh. Mion and I stopped talking and we used our notebooks to fan ourselves. I looked at the empty seat nearby. It was Rena's. Rena didn't come to school today. She called and told Chie-sensei she couldn't come because she's sick.
レナのやつ、最近元気ないよな。
Down, but she also could just be legitimately sick.
だね。暑さにやられたのかもね。
なあ、本気で暑さでやられたと思ってるのか？
そう思ってるけど。
例の一件がさ。
かもね。それに暑さも加わって、夏バテでも起こしたんじゃないかな。
Yeah, I think it's all three. I think she legitimately caught a cold. I think it's hot, and when it gets hot, it just always makes things worse. Like when it comes to how ill you feel. And then it's also just like been crazy. Can't even imagine how distressing it was for her to commit a murder, dismembering the bodies and getting caught by her friends. We took each other's hands at that place and we united. All of us believed that we had closed the case there and had regained our peace. But was that as easy for Rena as it was for us? She must have not quite recovered yet.
おじさんはみんなで楽しく遊んでれば、そのうち元気になると思ってたんだけどね。そこまで心の傷が浅くなかったってことかな。
こういう時さ、どうしたらレナを元気づけられるかな。
多分、ほっとくのが一番じゃないかな。
おいおい、そんなのでいいのかよ。俺たち仲間だろ。
ほら、ホームシックってあるじゃない？
That word has new meaning now.
あれもね、ちょっと寂しいからって言って、実家に電話なんかかけちゃうと、一気に発症しちゃうらしいよ。
Now her situation is interesting if you think about it, because like she lives here in town, you know, to inherit the title of like leader of the clan, but she has to do it with living with her grandma and not living at home. So homesickness has a different meaning for her. Also, who are you? Now they didn't say exactly. They're talking about the incident though. Now she could just be faking it. If it is Shion could just be faking it, of like. Yeah, like the incident. She's like, yeah, maybe, but you know, I don't know. Who are you?
寂しい時はぐっと耐えて、例えばスポーツにでも打ち込んで気分転換を図るのが一番なんだってさ。
気分転換させてやりたくても、あいつ最近部活に加わらないし。
I mean, that's a big leap. I'm pretty sure she does, but she just didn't feel good.
レナはどうか知らないけどさ、人には甘えたい欲ってのがあるんだよ。そばに支えてくれる人や同情してくれる人がいると甘えたくなる欲。慰めてくれる人が現れるとさ、際限なく甘えちゃうことってない？
どうだろうな。
際限なく甘えるってことは、相手の同情をより深く得ようとするってこと。そうすると、ケイちゃんは慰めてるつもりなのに、相手はどんどん落ち込んでいっちゃうことがあるんだよね。慰められて甘えられる。これに味を占めると、不幸に酔うのが癖になる。
Okay, but didn't you all kind of admit that when Satoshi went off the deep end last year, sitting back and doing nothing and giving him space was like the wrong thing to do?
レナもその辺分かってるから、わざと一人になろうとしてるんじゃない？慰めや甘えが目的だったら、私たちのそばにいて涙を流せば済むわけだし。
じゃあ、落ち込んでるレナをどう励ませばいいんだよ。
女の心情としては、辛さを励ましてくれるより、忘れさせてくれる方が嬉しいね。
慰めるな、励ますな。なんだよ、お手上げじゃないかよ。
慰めるな、励ますなは、心理カウンセラーの鉄則だって知ってる？結局、心の傷ってのは、自分で治すようにできてる。
I mean, there's truth to that, but like also working with a therapist helps a lot. Like they can help you heal yourself. Like they're not going to patch a band-aid on you and make you better. But it's not good to just not go to a therapist.
周りの人が治したとしても、それは本当の完治じゃない。だから、レナが自分で元気になるのを、私たちは見守るしかないんだよ。
Again, I feel like we're repeating the same mistake that we talked about making with Satoshi.
理屈じゃ理解できるな。なんだか薄情な気がして、好きになれねえな。
I think you can still do little things. Like, heck, leaving little notes, bringing her homework. Like, you know, don't try and force her to play games with you or like force her to go out and do stuff with you, but you could always still like show that you're supporting and that you're there. I clapped my hands behind my head and looked at the ceiling. Mion laughed.
それだけレナのことを心配してくれるケイちゃんが身近にいるなら、立ち直れるよ。
近くにいるだけでか？うさんくさいな。
ケイチにだってできることがありますですよ。
Oh, what are you going to say? Rika-chan spoke up. I wonder how long she'd been listening to our conversation.
俺にもできることがあるのか？
レナが話したいと思った時や、打ち明けたいと思った時に、静かに聞いてあげることなのです。
That's very true. In fact, but the trouble can be, like, how do you know when she wants to?
聞くだけでいいのか？励まさなくていいのかよ。
Listening will help her feel better.
ケイちゃん、打ち明けるだけで心が軽くなるもんだよ。
Yeah, in fact, it's almost better if you don't do the typical guy thing, which is to try and fix it. Like, listen and be like, that really sucks, or like, I understand.
静かに耳を傾けるのが何よりも嬉しい時ってある。
There's a lot of power in being able to just listen to somebody. And not just like, but like actively listen. Like listen, ask questions, dig deeper, but like not in your own way, just listening. It makes a world of difference.
ミーの言う通りなのですよ。レナが話したいと思った時、いつでも話しかけられる場所にいてあげるのも、きっと仲間として大切なことなのだと思いますです。
I clicked early. Sorry. Mion and Rika-chan were absolutely right. I was going to pat Rena on her shoulder and tell her to cheer up when I saw her next, but now I know that would have been one-sided on my part. Rena doesn't want to feel down on herself. She wants to cheer up if at all possible. If I cheer her up irresponsibly, she'd be very disappointed because she'd think I didn't understand her pain.
そうだな。俺、ちょっと人の心ってやつを理解しようとしてなかったな。レナを励ましたいのは、俺の欲求であって、レナの求めることじゃない。
That's a great way to think of it. I know it's what I want to do. Because he wants her to cheer up, be her old self, and then get back to normal life. But that's not fair. He can't just expect people to just be themselves.
ありがとな、二人とも。俺、ひょっとすると、今日まで何か勘違いをしてたかもしれないぜ。
Oh, Keiichi, you say that so many times, and yet it never actually is quite true. On the day, I thought I cheered her up. But I started to doubt if I had reached her heart. I might have just been dragging her someplace where I wanted her to go. I wasn't on her side in the real sense of the term. All of a sudden, Rika-chan patted my head.
ケイチは一番のレナの味方ですよ。それは疑わなくて大丈夫なのです。
It really is like you know what I'm thinking sometimes.
俺、また考え事を口に出しちまってたのか？
レナの心には届いてるよ。ケイちゃんはあの日、とても強い力をレナに与えたんだからさ。いやー、でもさ、よくよく思い出すと、すっごい恥ずかしいこと言ってたよね。
But we all know, Mion, that's basically who he is. Keiichi is just a big drama boy. We heard footsteps from the hallway and everybody started to head back to their desks.
お待たせしました。それでは委員長、起立。
Alright. Class day. We didn't have a club meeting that day because Rena wasn't around. That worked out for me, because I had an errand to run. It wasn't a big errand. My mom wanted us to use her point card to get some detergent. I didn't see the point of going all the way to the store just to get detergent, but my mom told me to go because she's busy helping my dad with his work. I started walking toward the shopping center. I noticed someone was watching me, hiding behind a distant tree. I wonder who was such a mischievous thing. I stared at them to find out who it was, at which point they emerged.
おレナじゃねえか。
Oh, interesting. Are you feeling better now? I was about to say that, but I swallowed the words. Somehow Rena looked very serious.
どうしたんだ
Yeah, what's up with this? Rena put her index finger to her lips and told me to be quiet, looked around carefully, and beckoned for me to come over. I had no idea what was going on, but I followed her instructions, shut my mouth, and ran to her. Rena gestured for me to squat down and hide in the shadow of the bush. I didn't know why I had to, but I could ask her questions later. I just followed her orders for now. Rena looked like she was making sure no one was following her. If it was Mion, she'd do something like this just to fool me as a joke, but I know Rena doesn't do things like this for fun. I had no idea what kind of situation I'd gotten myself into, but I could feel how tense it was. I made myself as small as I could.
もういいよ。ごめんね。
The tone of her voice made me relax a little.
どうしたってんだよ、一体。
多分私、誰かに最近、後をつけられているの。
Now, interesting. Who could it be? Who could it be? Someone in the village, part of the cult members? That's what I would normally jump to. But now, Oishi might have someone tailing her professionally. That also feels very likely. Because he definitely, was able to gain insights and stuff, so making, him having a team of tailors. We know he does that, as people get followed. So that could be really real. Or it could be Yoshio-sama.
なんだって
Who would follow her? When I thought about it, I realized how stupid the question was.
まさか、警察かよ。
Rena, Mamiya, and Teppei Hyojo. The two people disappeared. Even though they were awful human beings, the police had to investigate if they found out they'd gone missing. It probably wouldn't be difficult to find out that Rena had been to Rena's house, but it should be okay. As long as they don't find those bags, it should be okay.
警察なのか、警察じゃないのかわからないけれど、Watanagashiの夜以降、誰かにずっと見られている気がするの。
どういうことだよ。
Once I said that question, Rena stared directly at me with a blank expression. Her eyes looked as though they were evaluating me. She stared at me as if she was assessing whether I was worth talking about something very important. Rena squeezed her own wrist tightly and started talking in a whisper.
話してもいいけど、誰にも内緒にできる？
That's a good question.
ああ、もちろんだぜ。レナがそうしろってんなら、誰にも喋らない。
ケイイチ君なら信用できるよ。
She smiled and looked around one more time.
連中はひょっとすると、ミオさんのスクラップ帳を探しているのかもしれないの。
ミオさんって、ああ、看護師の高野さんのことか。あと、スクラップ帳って何のことだ？
秘密の捜査になっているって言ってたから、多分、ケイイチ君は知らないよね。高野ミオさん。殺されたんだって。
Oh, right. Keiichi would know at this point.
え
Shh!
いつ
Shh! She told me to be quiet again. I lowered my voice and let her continue.
綿流しの夜、私たちはミオさんと、あとあの直後に、二人が襲われたんだって。富武さんは、お社様のたたりにあって、喉をかきむしって死んだ。
Again, there's also that consistency of the clawing out the throat. That was something that Rena tried to do as well. Wonder if that has something to do with the parasite potentially. Huh.
ミオさんは、岐阜の山中で焼き殺されていたと言ってたの。
It's also interesting to know that they found her in this reality, or at least this version of the story.
それ、本当かよ。そんなの誰も知らないぞ。
Keiichi, why would anyone tell you this normally?
それは、警察が伏せて捜査をしてるからなの。hinamizawa村連続開始事件は、
今年で5年目になっちゃうでしょ。だから変に騒がれたくないんで事件を公にしていないんだって。
なるほど。秘密捜査なのは分かったが、レナはそんな話、どこで聞いたんだよ。
内緒だよ。私、実は、大石っていう沖宮署の刑事さんと連絡を取り合っているの。その人に教えてもらった。
どうして、大石って人がレナに？
さあ、彼が言うには、私なら信用できそうだからって言うんだけどね。
Of course he said that. I was dumbfounded to hear all this. But I knew she wasn't lying. If it was Mion, she'd be sticking her tongue out by now, but Rena wouldn't make a joke of something like this.
ミオさんが殺された理由は、多分、彼女の研究のせいだと思うの。ミオさんが、この村の歴史とか、民族学とか、そういうのを熱心に調べてたってのは知っている？
なんとなくは聞いたことある。
Takano-san was interested in the occult and mysterious things. I remember Mion once told me that she was studying the village's legends of the man-eating demons out of curiosity.
彼女は多分、その研究の中で、この村に関するある重要な秘密を知ってしまったの。
You know, Shion, in her timeline, she had the notebooks, or at least access to them. But this might be the first time we see somebody who has, like, access to them after she passed. I wonder if we, like, because, like, there might actually legitimately be something very important in there. But I doubt it's what we've read so far.
あるいは彼女は、そんなにも確信には踏み入ってなかったのかもしれないけど、そうは思われなかったんだろうね。
That seems the most likely, that she was drawing enough information that maybe it's like, they also might have been worried that she technically had all the answers, but like they're spread out, uncontextualized. But all you needed was was the context, and it would pull all the threads together and make sense. And so maybe she had all the bits that she needed and just needed like basically a cipher for it, and that was what they were worried she was going to find.
ちょっと待て。この村の秘密ってなんだよ。
私は、ミオさんのスクラップ帳を、でも、彼女が特に大事にしていた秘蔵の数冊だから、かなり重要なことが記してあったと思う。だから多分、ミオさんが至ろうとしていたことに、8割方ぐらいは近づいていると思うの。でも、あまりに突拍子もなくて、私にはまだ信じられない。
True.
ミオさんの想像が正しいかどうか、検証してる段階なの。
で、なんなんだ？秘密を知ると殺されるっていう、この村の秘密ってのは。
Alright, Keiichi. I want to do an exercise in thinking about what you just said, and really, really think about whether you actually want that answer, considering what you just said. I gasped at the moment the words left my mouth. If Rena told me, I might get killed too. Thank you.
ケイチ君には、まだ全部話したくない。確証が持てたら話すね。だって、それくらいに途方もない、とんでもない話だから。
確証ってなんだよ。
例えば、予備知識のない内訳については、私自らがその存在を検証できているけど、他にもたくさん未検証のことがあるの。
Alright, Rena, that story is already crazy enough. You saying it without any context is going to sound like literal madness.
それらを埋めていかないと、私ですら、にわかには信じられない。
Maggots? I was totally lost now, and I wanted to ask her some questions, but I decided not to cut in. It was so hot outside. But Rena held her arms as if she were cold.
レナ、俺はいつだってお前の味方なんだからな。俺だけは信用してくれて構わない。
ありがとう。その一言が、すごい嬉しい。
From her expression alone, I could tell that she really meant it. I could also tell that she was involved in something very big and that she felt very lonely because she couldn't tell anybody else about it. I had to be on her side while she was going through a difficult time.
私とね、今日ここで出会ったことは内緒にした方がいいと思うの。
I would ask her now, like, what do you want me to do?
私と接触があったことが知られたら、ケイチ君にも危害が及ぶかもしれないから。
わかった。俺に何か協力できることはないのかよ。
Good man.
今はない。でも、協力をお願いできることが分かっただけで、今の私には心強いよ。最後には頼らせて。ね。
おう、任せとけ。
し、
Oh, a
車
car.
が来る。
Rena pushed my head into the bush. I went along with it and crouched down even lower in the bushes. We stayed quiet for a while, and I could hear a car coming closer, and after a while, a white van passed by. It's the white van. So there's the isekai truck, and then there's the Hinamizawa white van of killing people. I was surprised at her hearing. She heard the car coming when it was still far off in the distance.
今の車、ナンバー見えた？
いや、ごめん。見えなかった。
私もちょっと見えなかったけど、多分さっきと同じナンバーの車だと思うの。
That's disconcerting.
レナを尾行しているとかいう連中か？
多分、普段車なんか通らない道で、今日は何度も追い上げられるの。その度に、私は隠れてやり過ごしているからいいんだけど。
Yeah, it's like they know where you
どうもお
are
かしい。
without seeing you.
そいつらなのか？高野さんたちを殺して、レナが持ってるスクラップ帳を狙っているという連中は。
I feel like if they really wanted the scrapbook alone, they could just break into your house.
多分。
I don't blame her for not being able to believe what was going on because this is really crazy. Takano-san uncovered something really significant through her studies. The people who want the information hidden found out about it, and they killed her on the night of Watanagashi, copying the curse of Oishio-sama. They're looking for the scrapbook, the fruits of her research, and Rena has them. That's why they're trying to kill Rena?
じゃあ、レナの家が危ないってことはないのか？
大丈夫。スクラップ帳は、ゴミ山の私の隠れ家に隠してある。
Okay.
お父さんが不安だけど、何も知らないからこそ、何も危害が及ばないかもしれない。圭一くんが言わなくても、顔に書いてあるよ。突拍子もない話で、とても信じられない。
I mean,
でしょ？
you said it yourself. I agree. I wanted to deny it, but I felt bad to lie and remain silent in affirmative.
それが当然の反応。私だって、ミオさんのスクラップ帳を読み始めた最初は、なんだこりゃって思って、全然信じられなかったもの。
But it's kind of like there's more circumstantial evidence that's pointing toward actually being true now because she described the maggots before she had heard that there was like a tradition, like a historical story about them back in the day of people reporting the same thing. So that's really interesting. And then this idea of like, okay, yeah, but maybe the scrapbooks are just scrapbooks until now it feels like someone's following her, not just like, oh, there's a step behind me type of following. This is like, I'm seeing a van that seems to be stalking me following, like a legitimate, like, terrifying thing.
すべてに目を通して、ようやく何かの筋が見えてきたんだもん。
すまん。もちろん、レナの味方になりたいのは本心。でも、話が全然見えないんで、どう助けてやればいいかわかんないんだ。
話せば、圭一くんの身にも危険が降りかかるよ。
レナにはすでに降りかかってるんだろ？ならおあいこだぜ。気にするな。
What a good man.
わかった。話す。多分、ミオさんたちを殺したのは、ひなみざわ御三家。もっとはっきり言ってしまえば、みーちゃんの家である。
Oh,
その先本家。
yeah.
どうして？
圭一くんも、過去の連続開始事件は知ってるよね。
ああ、ダム戦争の時の村の旧敵ばかりが、毎年犠牲になっていくっていう、あれだろ？
この連続開始事件は、ダム戦争の生産のようなものなの。村の裏切り者を片付けることによって、本当の意味でダム戦争を終わらせようとする。
確かに、そう見えないことはないよな。誰もが、はっきりと口にはしないが、うすうすと園崎家の仕業だと疑ってる、みたいな話は聞いたことあるぜ。
It is handy how, as we go through these chapters, Keiichi becomes more and more, like aware of things. But it helps the story, so I don't mind it. But it is kind of funny.
でも、裏切り者を制裁するなら、別に綿流しの場にこだわらなくてもいいんじゃない？毎年、たたりで一人、鬼隠しで一人なんて、スローペースで殺す必要はない。そうでしょ？
I've never heard the words demoning away before, but Rena clearly thought they had some kind of creepy significant meaning, so I decided not to cut in.
つまり、これらの連続開始事件は、綿流しの祭りに神聖性を取り戻そうとする意志があるの。
To be fair, it's working.
もっと踏み込んで言うと、明治以降に失われた鬼ヶ淵村の神聖性を取り戻すための、彼らは最終的には太古の昔にそうだったような原理的なお社様信仰を復活させることを目的としている。
お社様信仰？ 古出神社のことか。
そう。古出神社って崇められていると思う？お年寄りの人は敬っているけど、それだけだよね。子供たちは境内を遊び場くらいにしか思ってないし、ほとんどの村人たちも地域の集会所くらいにしか思っていない。その神聖性は失われている。それがダム戦争をきっかけに蘇ったの。彼らはそれをお社様信仰を復活させるいい機会だと捉えた。
ってことはつまり、お社様信仰の狂信者たちが裏で暗躍しているってことか。
そういうこと。そもそもお社様信仰は御三家によって管理されていた。だから御三家には現代にも脈々とお社様信仰を復活させなければならないという至上目的が受け継がれているの。それを思えば御三家がダム戦争中に村を一丸にまとめたり、廃れかけていたお社様を引き合いに出し、古出神社にわざわざ同盟事務所を設けた理由も透けて見えてくる。
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a good, succinct way to put it, actually. And the motivation could be there. But who were the ones specifically motivated to make sure that the original primeval worship setting was brought back? Because, like, the person I would think would be the most motivated would be the further days, specifically maybe Rika. But Rika's parents died, and we know that Rika is prophesied to die this year. So why?
じゃあ、Hinamizawa村連続開始事件ってのは、いや、お社様を信仰する狂信的な集団の仕業なら待てよ。どうして高野さんが殺されなきゃならないんだ？
それは御三家が鬼ヶ淵村と呼ばれた太古からずっと隠してきた。それを暴かれるとお社様という神の神聖性が失われる。
Now, it almost feels like she's going to say something we haven't heard yet.
だから彼らはミオさんの研究が確信に近づいたことを知り消したの。
その重大な秘密ってのは何なんだ？それを知ると俺も狙われるってんだろうけど、上等だぜ。
だからそれはまだ言いたくない。私自身が10割の確証を得るまで
Okay.
言いたくない。
Okay.
多分今ここで話してもケイイチ君は耐えきれなくなって笑い出してしまうに違いないもの。
I think she's referencing to parasites.
おいおい、俺がそんな奴に見えるかよ。
Yes, but...
もう少し時間が欲しいの。あまりの事実に私ですら受け入れきれていないの。だからもう少し時間を欲しいの。お願い。
わかった。
今日ここで話したことは誰にも喋っちゃダメだよ。みーちゃんとリカちゃん、もちろんさとこちゃんにもダメ。
わかったよ。
じゃあケイイチ君はもう行って。私はもう少し辺りを伺ってから行く。
Okay.
用心に過ぎるということはないからね。
Rena ducked low into the bushes and moved away. I was left alone there. The cries of the cicadas surrounding me, making it seem as if I was alone there the whole time. I started walking, still dumbfounded. In the end, Rena didn't tell me the secret because she was afraid of putting me in danger. But she told me clearly that there are people who want to resurrect the cult of Oishiro-sama. And they're among the 3 families that control the entire village. They orchestrated the scenes of mysterious deaths for a purpose, and that they killed Takano-san because she got too close to a secret they wanted to hide. Rena met Takano-san and happened to obtain the scrapbook in which Takano-san wrote about her research. Rena still can't believe the secret's written in the scrapbook because it's too crazy. Hey, come on, Rena. You're kidding me, right? It's like one of these comic book stories. A mysterious occult group is plotting a conspiracy? Yeah, it feels right out of, like, frickin' H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, it's not funny, even if it is a joke. But Rena is right about one thing. Even if this is true, it's really hard to believe. I understand why Rena wanted to wait to tell me the secret. Maybe she was fooled by Takano-san? But Takano-san was murdered for real. So if it is all true, somehow I was following Rena looking for the scrapbook? I remember, Rena said that white van was following her. You can see you can see white vans anywhere. I bet there are a lot in the village alone. She might just be oversensitive to everything right now. Rena hasn't recovered from the shock since that day. That's probably why she got the idea in her head that the police or somebody else is coming after her. I didn't cut that in while she was talking. I think I did the right thing. If I had said that it was ridiculous or something to her face, Rena wouldn't have trusted me ever again. At that point, however, I gasped. A white van was parked on the side of the street. I wasn't sure if this was the same car that passed earlier since I didn't see the plate number. Why are we doing the chimes of doom? But the number of people in the car and the ambience of it was similar to the one earlier. And there was one thing that looked suspicious about it. There was no reason to park here. It was on a small road in the middle of the woods. There's nothing around here. No traffic light, no vending machines, no public phones. I probably wouldn't notice it under ordinary circumstances, but I felt something was wrong. Do not do anything weird. Just keep on going, but get the license plate. And once I noticed how odd it was definitely suspicious. There were 4 men in work uniforms in the white van. The driver was smoking a cigarette, but the other men were just sitting there doing nothing. If they wanted to take a break or have a smoke, they could have chosen a better place than here. It was possible they'd stopped because they had to go to the bathroom really badly, but it didn't seem that way either. They didn't look as comfortable or relaxed as they would if they were taking a break. They looked like they were waiting for something to happen. There was a deep tension in the car. Could they possibly be waiting for Rena? No way. I didn't see anybody walking around here. The road's back road. Nobody really uses this road, let alone by car. But that's impossible. I felt bad for Rena for even thinking about it, but this must be something that she got in her head because she's feeling victimized or something. She must be imagining things because she's so nervous from what her friends caught her in the act of killing Rena and Teppei.
Nii-chan.
I heard someone say that when I passed by the van. He couldn't mean me. He didn't even know who I was. So I assumed he was talking to one of the other people in the car. I pretended I didn't hear him and kept walking by, and then he said it again. And honked his horn as well.
兄ちゃん、すまんね。学校の帰りかいね。
He added a strong accent similar to that of the older villagers. He must live here, and I didn't know him. Could tell he didn't know me either because he didn't call me by name. So he has like the old town, like the old like Hinamizawa accent, but nobody knows him. So this guy like what live up in the mountains or something?
はい、そうですけど。
兄ちゃん、学校からこの道をずっと歩いてきたんで、ちょうど文房具屋の角を曲がって。
そうですけど、何か?
They were probably lost and I thought. This village has many small turns. You could easily get lost when you try to take a shortcut. So they must have been waiting for someone to ask for directions. But then he said something disturbing.
兄ちゃんさ、この道の途中で女の子に会わんかったかいね。
Rena's got a frickin' point. She's right.
白い帽子に白い服を着た女の子なんよ。
Fetch me.
紫のリボンもついとん。会わんかったかいね。
They were definitely talking about Rena.
いえ、会ってないです。
It wasn't really to hear them ask that. Rather, I was scared. That's why my voice got all shaky. Up until that point, I couldn't believe Rena's story. I thought it was ridiculous. I actually laughed, if only to myself. That's why I wasn't ready at all. My heart was beating fast. I was sweating all over. I immediately answered, no, I didn't, but it might have sounded like an obvious lie. The driver stared into my eyes. He looked like he was trying to figure out if I was lying or not, and my legs started to shake. I felt like I was a frog under the glare of a snake, and I couldn't move a muscle for a while. But I think the same went for those men, too. They were clearly a suspicious group, and they had just asked a villager about a girl out of the blue. Anybody would get suspicious. I was right. The man broke the ice and started making excuses before I even asked him why he wanted to know about the girl.
ああ、そんな深い意味はないんね。
Oh, because that feels legit.
さっき、女の子を追い抜いたのによ。来たのが男の子だったから。
そうですか。
忘れてえな。ごめんな、兄ちゃん。うちら、もう行くんて。
The man stared at the engine and drove away. After they left, I saw nothing. That's right, nothing. There was no reason why they had to park here. Did you look at the plate? So, were they really waiting for Rena? I mean, obviously, yes. Oh, that's the first real confirmation we've had, though, about the van being associated with, like something to do with the families and the cult or whatever. Like, we knew that, but, like, now we know that. Lunch takeout, list 2. Oh, mystery machine. Be drawn further into the conspiracy. Yeah, conspiracy really feels like the word here. Alright, lunch takeout, list 2. Furthermore, it's important that we closely monitor her father. Since he's already suffered mental shock from the divorce and been trying hard to take care of the patient, there's a strong possibility he may develop an induced delusion disorder. At the first step of the mental care, one should listen to the patient's story carefully without denying it. There's the most basic of basics. However, when the patient and the listener are related, it's easy for the listener to become deeply influenced by the patient's delusions. Additionally, delusional parasitosis is widely known to make people highly impressionable, and the influence sometimes can spread throughout a whole community. Therefore, even if several people claim to acquire a parasitic infection, it doesn't necessarily prove the existence of a parasite. Some of the phone calls to the health center call centers are for the extermination of pests are nothing but a mass delusion. Like, it's specifically trying to make a reason why the parasite could be a legitimate thing. Since the subject matter of the delusion in this case is extremely rabid, the patients might harm or even kill each other in abnormal ways, believing this to be treatment for the disease. They might also give up hope and commit suicide together in the worst case. The influential delusion disorder, otherwise known as shared psychosis disorder, has shown a particularly strong possibility of influencing close companions. Anyone who's going to contact the patients must be made to understand that the patients are under mental treatment, must be warned not to be influenced by the patient's delusions. Yeah, I imagine that's actually really difficult when working with really mentally troubled people. Also, it's really interesting because it's like it's almost floating this idea, like, makes you think of the Jonestown massacre, right? Is that the one where they like drink they all drank like the poison Kool-Aid or something? Or no, I think that was the Kool-Aid drinking was a cult in South America who purposely were killing themselves, believing they were going to ascend to a higher dimension. I think Jonestown was that the people had weapons, and like the federal like government was coming in to arrest them, and so they started like poisoning and killing everybody to try to avoid getting captured. Like, still horrifying. Individuals who are likely to be easily influenced by the patient's family members and people who are deeply care about the patient, such as boyfriends or girlfriends. This is going to be like why Keiichi gets sucked into all this. I don't know, man. There's some pretty legitimate evidence here. Like, white van of freaking creepiness wasn't fake. Oh, okay. Well, that's freaking spicy. Yeah, so clearly Rena is being hunted now. And I don't think those guys are the police. And so, like, is it the Notebooks? Because they were the ones that were hunting Keiichi in chapter 1. Like, it's clearly the same people. Is it just because, like she talked to Oishi? Like, that's the connection I'm seeing there. But at the same time, it also feels very arbitrary, or very, like, also feels like the Sonozakis, like how they would do stuff, right? But they have the old accents, which is like, and the Sonozaki's primary, like, headquarters is in Okonomiya, not necessarily Hinamizawa. So, like, what is going on? Like, I feel like we're on the cusp of some, like, really important answers I hope we'll get, but my gosh, it's actually, like, at this very moment, it feels much more muddled, because I'm seeing, like I said, now I've got these 3 branches of possibility, and I'm seeing, like, all 3 of them are now feeling more validated than before, and it's like, I hate how it does it simultaneously like that. Oh, well. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed making it, and I hope you enjoyed my ranting, because I ranted a lot this time. But that's nothing new, right? If you hated that, you wouldn't be here anymore. So thank you for that. Thank you especially to the patrons and members of the channel. It means the world to me that you're here and helping. It's so wonderful, and I appreciate everything you give me. Like, obviously, I can't do this as a career as of yet, but, like, even your little support helps. It helps me get art for the channel, helps me, like, maintain the equipment for the channel, and it means the world to me. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope you keep coming back for more. But before next week, hopefully there's something else on the channel you can watch. I got a great backlog, so always shout it out if I can. But anyway, that's all there is. So until the next video you're watching me, I'll see me in next. I'll see you there.